Here we go. This is going to be a really great episode. I've been waiting for this. All right, let's get started with this. Terence Lester, tell everybody who you are and if you can possibly do it, what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Terence Lester. I'm the founder and executive director of Love Beyond Walls. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. Our organization focuses on poverty advocacy, homelessness advocacy, but also this very intentional way of building unique relationships with individuals who are houseless as a way of helping them to walk out of the plight of homelessness. And so we've been in existence for about 7 years. And yeah, it's been 7 years, man, already. And yeah, we started in 2013 and we've just been growing and advocating ever since.
Now that's what your organization does, but tell everybody that the reason I said I wasn't sure if you could do it because you're doing about 1,000 things. So when you describe yourself, like, how do you talk about that? And what are like some of the many things you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I have a few different things going on. Currently, I'm in school. I'm in a PhD program studying public policy and social change at Union Institute and University, based in Cincinnati. And my research interest is around social constructions and how political rhetoric has actually influenced the criminalization of homelessness. So when you talk about like how rhetoric criminalizes somebody or places a label on someone, and policies are then written in response to how people are viewed, that's my research. I think that's really important because our society lacks empathy, especially when it comes to like writing policies, especially those that criminalize and marginalize people who are already poor and houseless. For instance, you have people or cities that have laws and ordinances. I read the other day, one city banned any type of camping, right? There's another city that will cite you and fine you if you have multiple bags with you. So like if you're experiencing homelessness, you're living on the streets, if you have 3 bags with you, you can be cited and fined and ticketed. There's cities that will give you tickets for like sharing food with someone or standing in a public place. So I'm doing that. I'm also, I just finished a 3rd book proposal, which is a really huge topic for me. It's about race, faith, and the church. And I also just completed another book that will be out May 18th called When We Stand, The Power of Seeking Justice Together. And yeah, I'm leading the organization. I'm a husband. I'm a dad, man. I love my kids. I love my family. And I'm trying to do it all within 24 hours a day.
I know you get started early with working out too.
Yeah. I've been on this health journey, man. One of the things that I found out specifically for 2020 is how out of shape and neglecting of my health I really was. That I was succeeding and flourishing in all of these other areas, like writing books and leading and speaking on different platforms or getting awards and being a good husband or a good dad, but like my health was declining, right? And so one of the practices that I implemented in 2020 was to take care of myself. You have all of the racial trauma and the racial tension that was emerging from protests and what we saw in terms of imagery on the television screen. You have political unrest. You have all of these things. You have COVID, right? I'm working on the front lines and I wasn't really taking care of myself. And so every morning now I carve out at least an hour of time to like get my health in order. And I've lost about 51 pounds in 4.5 months. And I've been diligent in that, man, because if you're going to go for the long haul, what I've been finding out is that you have to take care of your physical body. Yeah.
DC. So what do you think about your new friend, Terrence?
I'm thinking that he's getting more done in 24 hours than most of humanity. That's the first thing that comes to mind. The other thing, brother, is this journey about your temple. I wasn't expecting that, but I got to tell you, when you popped up here on the Zoom, I was like, this dude looks a lot trimmer than some of the things that I've seen on you. So I'm curious, for those that are like listening, who are trying to figure out like how to get this done in COVID, break down your routine. First, your motivation to take care of your temple, Terrence, because you take care of so many others.
Right.
And then your routine to get you to where you are now.
Yeah. Well, man, it's funny, DC, man. I was invited to give a talk at a church this past Sunday, and the whole notion of the sermon was strength. Mm-hmm. And I stood up before like a scattered audience of people, and I told them that I had an addiction to food, right? I use food for stress, to cope with stress. I use food to celebrate, right? If something big happens, we're celebrating around food. Food is a cultural thing in the African or the Black community where we gather around the table and food is incorporated, right? You talk about some of the bigger holidays, they're big meals. Sometimes meals are cooked to the point where there's loads and loads of food just left over.
Oh, yeah.
So I had just become accustomed to using food as a crutch. Mm-hmm. And when I went to a physician just to do an annual physical checkup, which men don't really do, right? Mm-hmm. My doctor told me that my numbers were creating the perfect storm for me to have something bad happen.
Wow.
I remember leaving there, and the only thing that I could think about were my children. Yeah. You know, I'm not 40 yet, but I don't want to be in my 40s in a wheelchair or having some severe problems. I want to be able to see my daughter and my son grow up and be physically active. Like, I want to sustain the work that I'm doing long term. And so I really started to process a lot of those things. And immediately when I left there, it was like something that had clicked in me, man. I went and got a gym membership. I downloaded the Weight Watchers app. And I just went, bro, I needed something as an accountability system to keep me on track, some type of structured system. I vowed not to eat any bread, no sweets, no alcohol. I was just vegetables and protein, and working out about 4 or 5 times a week, sometimes 6 times a week. Mm-hmm. And for me, I wanted just to start with something. If that was walking, it's all cumulative. It adds up. If it's HIIT exercises, if it's calisthenics, whatever it was, I just wanted to do something that was manageable enough for me to stay consistent in it. And it's not to say that I didn't mess up or have like bad days where I slipped up. The thing I've learned about weight loss is that it's about consistency, not perfection. Mm-hmm. It's about the incremental and not the immensity of what you're trying to do. So that's how I ended up there, man. And I'm staying committed to it because I want to be around to see my kids grow up.
Wow. Jeff, I just got to say this about this brother. I mean, we're only a few minutes in, and to start with something personal. So here you are giving a speech, smattering of people around.
Yeah.
And you make this public confession, y'all, I'm addicted to food.
Right.
Terrence, I believe life is filled with parallels. So I'm going to draw one that I'm seeing in you right now. Here you are, strong man, smart man, who takes care of the vulnerable. You specifically use the term houseless. We're going to get into that later because I want to know the difference between houseless and homeless. But you specifically use houseless. These people are vulnerable. And you, who takes care of the vulnerable, looks after the vulnerable, are on a stage, yourself being vulnerable in front of people you don't even know.
Yeah.
Don't even know. I just want to applaud you for that, Terrence.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate it. Here's what I've learned, DC. Secrecy produces more weakness, right?
Mm.
And if and I'm just the type of dude, bro. Like I like to live my message through and through. And Jeff will tell you that. But like I embody what it is that I'm trying to do. So like if I'm on this journey and if being vulnerable on this journey helps somebody else,
Yeah.
then I would rather do that than to hide it and to wear a mask and to placate as if I have it all together, right? We have it was John Mason that says, you were born an original, why die a copy, right? We have too many copies that we see placating and putting on the facade as if everything is going right, right? Life isn't like that. Life is bees and honey. It's thorns and roses. It's rain and flowers. And so there's a dichotomy and a vacillation between the two. And I just feel like that vulnerability piece helps us stay humble. It helps us stay grounded, but it also gives other people permission to pursue their own journey of well-being.
Awesome. So I was thinking back as you were telling all of that, and I've got like now 2 pages of notes already, Terrence. But I remember the first time you and I met in DC. You'll like this story. So I was in the cafe at our office space, and 2 of my team members came up and they were like, we just got back from this talk. It wasn't a Creative Mornings, was it?
Yeah, it was Creative Mornings.
It was. Okay. So this was a couple of years back, and they said, this guy blew us away. You've got to see if he'll come and give a talk to Dragon Army, to our company. And so I hadn't heard yet of Love Beyond Walls or Terrence. And so I looked it up and I watched a few clips that were on YouTube or something. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to meet this guy. So I reached out and invited Terrence to the office. And I was just so struck. I was sitting there like ready to ask him if he would come and nourish my team. And instead he asked me if I would work with him, since I had built businesses before. And I was just blown away by the humbleness, because here I was like, I can't wait to learn from this leader and have him teach my team. And he immediately flipped it. You remember that day, don't you, Terrence?
I do, man.
Yeah. And then he gave the talk. And I'm telling you, if anybody listening can have him come speak to their business or company or organization, I mean, there were tears in my team. And, you know, Terrence has taught me something about proximity. And so Terrence, you know, you talk about this idea that proximity changes everything. Yeah. And as I think about empathy, which I think is the big thing lacking, especially in, you know, the white community, that's what you did that day. You brought them closer to the reality and changed some hearts and minds. And so I've watched you do that, you know, over the course of, and so I'm not surprised that you admitted in front of a group of people some of your weaknesses, because I appreciate your humbleness as a leader so much.
Yeah. Well, firstly, man, I just wanted to say, you know, the invitation alone, I remember when you first invited me, I remember telling my wife, I was like, oh, I got invited to this place called Dragon Army. And I was really excited. And I was like, what is Dragon Army? And I looked you up, man. And I was just like, oh, this is cool. I can't wait to meet Jeff and meet the team and all that stuff. So I was really excited. But more, I guess, more impacted at your ability to lean in and decenter yourself. We don't see that enough in, especially white males. You have a lot of things going for yourself. You don't have to listen, right? You don't have to extend your table, so to speak. You don't have to create room at the table. And one of the things that I oftentimes say that many people conflate are these 2 words, diversity and inclusion, right? People think they're interchangeable, right? Diversity is not the same thing as inclusion. Sometimes white people can invite persons of color to a table under the banner auspice of diversity, but they want their voices left at the door, right?
Yeah.
And inclusion is saying, you know, I'm inviting you to the table, or I'm coming to your table, and I want to hear from you. I want to take the posture of student. And so that's a different approach, and that's what we need more of. That's how we build bridges. That's how we, you know, co-collaborate, and that's how we change the world. And that's how I see you, brother. I mean, you know, you inspire me as well. You're a brilliant businessman, and I consider you an advisor, a mentor, a peer mentor. Is a new term, menternship, right? Where at any given time you can be a mentor or intern, right? But yeah, man, I love you, bro, and I appreciate you as well. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Mentorship.
Mentern, like
Mentorship.
mentor
I
and
love that.
intern together. Yeah.
I like that. I like
love
that. So,
Oh man.
so Jeff, I'm chuckling because Terrence, your story about what you thought about Jeff after you met him is the same as mine. Okay, so
Man.
Yeah, so I meet this brother through Mike Popowski, who is the head. Do you know Mike?
Yeah, I know Mike.
Yeah,
I met
okay.
Mike through Jeff.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, okay, got it. Yep. So he's at Dagger. So I sent an email, Terrence, to Mike last year in 3 other agencies, and the story basically went like this: Martin Luther King lived. He got beaten when he was talking about civil rights. But when he was in Memphis talking about money, he got shot and killed. And so it was about the bread. And so what I said to and yo, rest in power, Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sitting here without you. So respect. But I said, if that is what he was on out of Atlanta before he died, that was his evolution, then we're in Atlanta, a city that's growing exponentially. I'm like, Black folks and folks of color need to get that bread. So I sent an email to Mike and said, listen, how are we going to do this? He introduces me to Jeff, who I did not know was working on the A Pledge. You all can read about that later. And from the moment that I was on a Zoom call with this brother, you, Jeff, he started talking. I got real curious, Terrence, real curious, and found the same things you found. So, and now look, Jeff, this brother is connecting the two of us.
Right.
So, yo, respect, Jeff.
Respect, man. Yeah, for
sure.
sure.
Listen, all right. I appreciate that, you guys. But this is about Terrence. We need to
Okay,
let me pivot us back. But
Okay,
I love you both. Okay, so Terrence, what I'm curious, could you give the quick highlight from when you started Love Beyond Walls till the pandemic hit? Just sort of a few of the high points, and I know you worked hard and you struggled, and you know, one of the things you talked about is your health journey was that, you know, it's like one day at a time, it's cumulative, it adds up, as you said. So what I think happened is that you were putting things in places, whether you knew it or not, so that when the opportunity came, you were ready. And what I used to, DC, what I used to tell Terrence was I used to push him to think bigger. He's now doing things bigger than at least I ever dreamed. So I don't have to tell him that anymore. But so Terrence, could you do that sort of from the beginning till, you know, when the pandemic hit?
Yeah. So the idea of Love Beyond Walls started years and years and years ago, probably 16 years ago, but I originally created it through a campaign where one day I come home and I'm talking to my wife and I say, I've been building, you know, relationships with people experiencing homelessness in the heart of the city. And this one guy named Kurt said that he challenged me. He says, why don't you go and sleep in the shelter? Right. Because he was living behind the building, and I was asking him, like, why not go to the shelter? And he said it's uncomfortable. He said he wouldn't get any sleep. And then I tell my wife, I say, I'm supposed to make myself homeless and go through these experiences to educate people about the realities that people suffer through day to day. Long story short, she allowed me. That campaign was the first campaign I ever launched. I took my cell phone. Her and my kids dropped me off underneath the bridge. It's like the 17-degree weather in the middle of December, a few days before Christmas. And I didn't take anything but my cell phone. And here it is, I'm living underneath bridges, being put out of shelters. I went through all of those experiences, and I did it 2 different times for a combination. I lived on the streets for a little over a month. My family allowed me to do. And learned some incredible things. But through that journey, man, was using my cell phone and documentation to connect people underneath bridges and reunite them with their family members, to get them access to temporary shelter, all of these different things. A few months after that, we had a building, and found myself having a bus donated, where we converted this bus into a mobile barbershop, clothing closet, and mobile shower, to launching a campaign to bring attention to poverty by walking across the country in 2016, from Atlanta all the way to DC. And then I followed up again after I created that into a documentary on systemic poverty. I walked from Atlanta to Memphis to bring attention to homelessness and poverty. We have this community center where we're serving all of these different individuals on different levels, some who are, moderate poverty, but then there are those who are severe poverty, meaning that they live on the streets and they don't have any access to anything. And so just being deeply inspired by my community, wanting to continue to press, helping people recover their identification cards, get access to employment, find stable housing, give access to technology, grooming and support services. But more than anything, I think what we were creating was this community of acceptance. I was sitting on a panel with Father Greg Boyle, and he says this idea of love is really about receiving people, right? That we need to step away or move away from trying to manufacture love and receive people where they are. There's a quote right now that says, one of the greatest barriers or challenges to solving the issue of homelessness is our inability to understand it. And I really believe to go further than that is our inability to be proximate to it, to receive people who are actually plagued by it. And so we're building, all of these different things. In 2019, I launched Dignity Museum. Shout out to Dragon Army and Dagger, who came alongside us to turn this 40 foot shipping container into a immersive museum. So 48 and 48 helped to code the VR goggles that would give a person an opportunity to see what it's like to sit in trash when you're experiencing homelessness, or to have someone walk up on you and tell you their story and tell you, like in virtual reality, that they're afraid they may die in the cold this winter. That changes your perspective of it. And so we coded cell phones. So when people walk into this museum, they put headphones in and it takes you on an immersive journey, and you're listening to different stories to give you a perspective of the other side of the experience of homelessness. And little did I know that this would be the first unofficial museum that represents the subject of homelessness in the United States of America, as stated by Fast Company. And
Terence, on that note, I think you say it's also the first museum that experiences homelessness.
You're right. Yeah, because there are parallels. Every shipping container has a story. Every shipping container is transient, and every shipping container actually has something of worth and value on the inside. And that's parallel to the experience of homelessness. Every person has a story. Every person carries something special on the inside of them, and every person is transient and move around from place to place. But you don't really understand the beauty of it until you enter into the inside and understand what's going on the inside, really unpacking the stories of both the museum, but metaphorically unpacking the stories of people. And so we go through 2019. It was being, summoned by Georgia Tech. We were scheduled to go to Georgia Tech in 2020. That got canceled because of COVID. We were asked to bring it to the University of North Carolina. That got canceled. We did a small exhibition at the Center for Civil and Human Rights here in the city of Atlanta. But, going into 2020, man, I just I felt the tension and the weight and pressure of all of 2019, going through the ups and downs. And then in 2020, just trying to catch my breath, really, as a leader, as a, frontline worker, long before the frontline term was a thing. And right when I was getting my bearings, man, COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And I say, you've got to be kidding me,
Yeah. And I want to pause for a second, because then what happened since then has been unbelievable. Yeah. But DC, I see every component of Terence's story, another look on your face of, he did what? And he's doing what? It's quite incredible.
Woo! This is a bit like, for those of you all who are familiar with Russian dolls. So that's what's happening to me right now, Jeff and T. It's like, I'm like, okay, I kind of seen it. He's taking off a couple. Okay, that might be about it. No. There are more. Two things before we get into what's happened since.
Yeah.
T. By the way, Terence, I'd like to be respectful of people's names. Sometimes the spirit just moves me to say something a little different. Are you okay with me referring to you?
Yeah, man. You can call me T. Yeah.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. All right, so two things come to mind. The first one is this. It's one thing to say, I want to do good for a group of folks. And the way that I'm going to do good, or my organization is going to do good, is we're going to say, come on over here and we'll take care of you. Okay. That ain't what you did, bruh. You got dropped off under a bridge and you went to the people. So my first question to you on this, T, is, what was the first night like, bruh?
Yeah, the first night and the third night were the roughest. The first night was the roughest because it was already raining. Before my wife, my children, and myself, we were all over some friends' houses. It was pouring down, raining. It was cold. So it was like 27 degrees with a wind chill of like 17 degrees. And everybody's looking at me like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, yeah, like, this is what I've committed myself to. And leadership lesson, if you commit to something, follow through with it, But yeah, so I'm underneath this bridge. My feet are soaking wet. The community has rallied together to get me a tent. And I'm laying on jagged rocks. My toes feel like popsicles. There's a couple guys right outside of my tent, literally, arguing, and they were arguing because they were trying to both stand close to the fire. Might I add, the fire that was started was not started by firewood. It was donated clothes, right? Because people experiencing homelessness don't have firewood, right?
Yeah.
And so I go out of my tent and I walk over to my friend, Tony, and I say, bro, I can't sleep. My toes feel like popsicles. Tony was battling a terminal illness, no access to medication, etc. He goes into his tent, bro, and gives me his last donated pair of socks.
Oh, wow.
And that wrecked me, because I know people who have access to all sorts of privileges, and they're selfish. But then there's someone who has very little, who has a heart of generosity. Mm-hmm. And it totally wrecked me, because there's this view of people experiencing this plight that I'm supposed to be afraid of this person. When in reality, if you ask yourself, who was the last person that hurt you in your life, You won't point to a poor person. You'll
Yeah.
probably point to someone who else has access and resources and stuff. And the fourth night, man, well, the third night, I had to stay up 24 hours. It had gotten down to like 3 degrees. We were walking around from place to place, walk 2 miles to this one shelter who shut its doors on us because we were, I think, like 7 minutes late. Turned us away. Then we had to walk another 2 miles to downtown underground Atlanta. This Waffle House allowed us to stay inside. This guy brought us a cup of coffee, and as long as we kept refilling our coffee, we could stay up. We needed to just be inside and be somewhere warm because you could feel the numbness in your fingertips. There was this lady across from us. She was also experiencing homelessness, and she kept nodding. She kept nodding, and she nodded off one more time. And this guy put her out. The manager put her out. Never saw her again in 2-degree weather.
Oh, wow.
You know. And I bawled that night, man. I wept because, you already feel the physical wear and tear. You know how it is when you work out or do something for an extended amount of time and your body feels tired. Now imagine carrying that around all the time, trying to find different places or resources and all these different things, on top of having people look down on you, right? I was just mentally exhausted, man, in the first 3 days, just from trying to figure stuff out. And at any time I could have tapped out, right? And went home because I had that. But I didn't want to because I wanted to stay in it with the people that I was, wanting to serve. I needed to understand life from their side.
Wow. They go that Russian doll. That Russian. So, I'll say this one thing, and then Jeff, I know we want to pivot to 2021 and the extraordinary things that have occurred since 2020 going into 2021. But doing a museum for the homeless reminds me of this, Terrence and Jeff. Every story is worth being told and heard. And you are a living, breathing manifestation of that. So, yes, salute.
I appreciate it, man.
Salute. Wow.
Couldn't agree more. And Terrence is a wonderful storyteller. So Terrence, talk to us about the year of 2020, which could have been just an incredible,
disaster.
Disaster for the organization, right? And walk us through last year.
Yeah. So we had all of these plans, started planning in January, February comes, and then we started here, these little trinkles of the word COVID-19, which, coincidentally, it had already been in the newspaper a few times at the end of 2019, because it's COVID-19. And we also started to hear, as we were going into March, like the importance of hand washing and all of these different things to protect yourself against the spread and contraction of COVID-19. And when they started talking about like things shutting down, I panicked. I'm literally like, I'm a nonprofit leader. If things go to this, then people are going to be more reserved with their giving and their donations. Donations are going to decline. They were talking, about relief for businesses and such, but you didn't hear really anything about nonprofit relief and all those things. And we're a fairly smaller nonprofit, and I was frustrated. But I think out of my frustration and out of the challenges that I've ever faced, I've always found a way to find solutions and to be creative. And mainly that creativity has been driven by being proximate, that word proximity, to the people who have cries and concerns. And so there's a quote in our office space that says, you can never meet the needs of people that you've never met, right? And that's so important and true. So one day, we're hearing on the news that you got to wash your hands, you got to stay away from people. We're about to shut down. And in our center, there are people experiencing homelessness, literally telling us, "I'm afraid that I'm going to contract this virus because I don't have anywhere to wash my hands."
Mhm.
And then it dawned on me, yeah, public libraries are going to be closed, public spaces will be closed.
Mhm.
This community that had dealt with social distancing long before social distancing was a thing, um, we're going to feel this compounded even more. And so out of all of that, the anxiety around losing out and hearing these concerns, instead of like going into a shell, I asked myself, how can I show up more? How can I pivot to still become proximate to the community that I love and care about? And even if it's in the smallest way. And I remember driving home, I was frustrated. I got to the house, I was sitting on a couch, I was looking at the news and they were saying, wash your hands. And they kept saying it. And then I just turned to my wife and I said, I'm about to start putting sinks in the street. And
Mm.
she started laughing. And I was already online. I was like, yeah, I put a sink just like this in the street. So people experiencing homelessness can wash their hands. Where are they going to wash their hands?
Mhm.
And she looked at me, she says, yeah, you should do it. And because our organization had already had a history of working with RV units and repurposing RVs to provide temporary shelter, it was a no-brainer. Porta potties, portable cooking stations, portable sinks are features that people use for luxury when they're using our RVs to go camping with their families. And I was just like, we're going to take a feature of RV and repurpose it to put it out in the streets. And so got in touch with RV part manufacturer, and got some parts. We put together a first sink. And then I had a friend, one of my friends named Lecrae, he reached out to me. He was asking me what I was doing just out of the blue. And I was like, bro, I'm about to put some sinks in the street. And he was like, oh, I want to donate like 15 of them. So we got 15 or 16 sinks that we're about to start planting around the city. They have a base at the bottom. You fill them up with water. They have a pump. You could pump it. It has soap dispenser. You can wash your hands just right there on the spot. And so we all show up March 19, 2020, and we launched this campaign called Love Sinks In, right? And we plant the first 5 at a park in the heart of the city. And
can I just pause for a second? So March 19th, if I recall correctly, March 16th was the first day everything was locked down.
yeah.
I mean, that's 3 days later you had implemented this and we're running.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Still wanting to show up because, I could not be, I just could not be sitting at home and not on the front lines doing something to be proximate, man. And once I learned that if you worked with this type of population that you were considered a frontline worker, I'm the executive director. I wrote my own letter. I signed it. And I had my, papers if I was to be stopped or whatever. I'm like, I'm a frontline worker because I was. And we were out there providing sanitation, which sanitation should be a human right, giving people access to wash their hands in the streets. And I'll never forget, man, the first day we planted these sinks, we're in the heart of the city. We had this community of people talking to us about how they were forming relationships with commuters. They hadn't seen people. People hadn't been out sharing food and meals and all this stuff. And there was this group pulling up about to share some food. We planted the sinks. This guy takes off running to go and get a meal, but he turns around, comes over to the sink, washes his hands and says, I'm glad I can wash my hands before I eat.
Wow.
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
And so this thing spreads, and I had Bronny get involved, Porsche, UPS, Delta Community Bank, Starbucks, Google. All of these major companies saw the NFL Foundation, Coca-Cola, all these organizations, AbbVie, donated to us. and empowered us to be able to place sinks in 52 cities all around the country. And so we're in 27 states. We have close to 70 partners. We have sinks in Canada, as well as Australia and the United States. I was giving talks and lectures to leaders in South Korea, Denmark, all around the world, because this campaign like spread and went viral. And I found myself, I went from sitting on a couch and being worried about things shutting down to deciding I was going to show up and making this pivot in whatever way I could, even if it was a small way, to that opening doors for us to partner with so many people all around the country, and me having an opportunity to talk about what empathy is in the midst of hardship and suffering. Yeah.
And another Russian doll comes off the stack. I know DC is going to want to weigh in here, but let me just make sure you emphasize the exposure that you got. I remember early on in the pandemic, there was a global live video with Lady Gaga. And you guys were featured within that, right?
Yeah. I think it was a global stay at home together. It was on ABC, NBC. Man, I was on the Good Morning America. I talked to Katie Couric, Kelly Clarkson, CNN. I mean, it basically went everywhere. Just talking about the importance of showing up for others. And I think what the pandemic was, as much as has been, a curse to people and detrimental, because even plagued my own family. My wife's brother passed away 38 years old from COVID-19. Wow. It was also this hidden moment that revealed to so many people who had inattentional blindness to the vulnerable and the marginalized. It forced everybody to pay attention to disparity, right? Why? Because disparity was knocking on their door. And, something doesn't become necessarily real to you until it knocks at your door, right? And that's the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is, oh, I feel that, right? I feel sorry for you. But empathy is, I feel it in my heart and I want it to come out through my hands in service. How can I show up to make the world better and make a difference? And that was the moment that I believe that catapulted the visibility of those types of efforts, not just ours, but many different efforts of people on the front lines who had always been on the front lines working to balance the weights of equity and access to those who are marginalized.
Jeff, so this is Terrence and folks that are listening. This is the first time I'm doing a podcast here like this with Jeff. He's done a podcast, our podcast before. Jeff, you got to give me a little bit of heads up, brother, before you put me in something like this now. Okay, you got just a little bit of heads up. All right. So T, you're sitting on your couch. You thinking 2020 is gonna be a rough year. You had stuff lined up. Your words were a disaster. Okay,
a disaster.
So you got stuff lined up. 22 was gonna probably a pretty good year until things went, as my brethren in the UK would say, pear-shaped. Okay, things went pear-shaped, and you sit there thinking about the plight of people who are houseless and don't have the hygiene apparatus available to them that are basics for most.
Right.
And you go, I think I'm gonna put some sinks in the streets.
Yeah.
And your wife is like, I'm gonna say your wife's probably, you said your wife said, well, you should go and do that. I would imagine her first thought might have been something different than that. Okay, but the second thought was, yeah, baby, I got you. So here's what I'm drawing from it, T and Jeff. in a moment where there seems to be despair, where there seems to be a lack of opportunity, and when there is darkness, this is where sometimes the most powerful ideas come forward. And Jeff, I'll let you know, this is particularly the case in the Black community. There's this notion that for those that are listening, and it's come up in songs, Master P, Tupac, I Get Around, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. Master P has a song called Trying to Make $1 out of 15 cents. This is a hallmark of folks who lack. You have to be creative to make it. And so T, that's a remarkable example of using ingenuity in the face of apparently nothing. There's another saying, Jeff, you may or may not have heard of, and for my non-Black or brown brethren and sisters that are listening, we say this often in the Black community, something like this: we can make something of nothing, or nothing is actually something. And Terence is doing this on a daily basis, and it's just like flipping my wig. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, man. Wow, that's powerful, DC. Yeah. I mean, it's the notion of gumbo, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you take a little bit of everything, scraps.
Yeah.
And you make something and you serve it.
Yeah,
right?
that's dope.
Yeah.
So you end up finishing 2020. And I know just sort of organizationally, you probably, I mean, did you 5X? Did you 10X the size, both sort of financially and reach and everything that you're doing?
Yeah, 6X. Our annual budget, and was able to bring on more staff, and yeah, I mean, we're doing work. One of the most recent campaigns that we launched is called the Clean Break Project. We actually, there are shower trucks that popped up everywhere after like the first shower truck Lava May that was started by my friend Donice in California. But shower trucks that are run by organizations run on a schedule, right? And many people who access this type of sanitation have to wait until the organization comes out. Sometimes it's once a week, once a month, whatever. And I started thinking about this. My friend Virgil came to the office and he was talking to me. He experienced homelessness. He says, man, I have to use rain buckets and pray for rain. And when it rains, I gather the buckets and then I sit it out in the sun and I have to wait all day. And I use that water to clean myself. And started to think about how could we utilize like things like these 250 gallon containers that transports liquids that could be converted into like a self-contained shower. And so we actually created our first prototype on ML King Day. It's made out of two 250 gallon containers. It has a tankless water heater. I found a way that I could use a water pump and an extra bin that is filled with water to shoot up the water from this particular bin through the tankless heater, and it comes out like a shower. And we can plant these places, and brothers and sisters have access to like shower on the spot whenever they want to, right? And that's the type of things that I think about in terms of like balancing the scale of equity, because it's not like we don't have the resources, right? It's about reimagining what's already there and repurposing it to give people access to things that they otherwise wouldn't. And so we're hoping we've already gotten like requests from other cities. People want to replicate it and stuff. And we're working on like a little manual to be able to, in a video, to teach people how to do it and empower other people in other parts of the country. And that's kind of like where I am in my heart now. When people ask me about scaling, I want to scale our philosophy. I want to scale replication in the hearts and minds of people who have the same type of heart that I do, right? I don't want to hoard it all to myself. I want to empower other people and show them a pathway, because if I'm doing that, then I am reaching my goal, right? By empowering other leaders, but also seeing those leaders and championing them to show up and be proximate to the community that I love and care about, even the people that I may meet and may not ever meet.
All right. Well, DC, before I'm going to give you the last word on this, and then I've got one final question that I like to ask all my guests. But I just want to say, one thing, Terence, that you always had passion and purpose, and you were always driven, and selfless and humble, and really everything that I look toward leaders to be. But I think maybe you've shown yourself this now, maybe you always had it, but the word I would use now is limitless. It seems to me now I can't imagine anything coming your way that you can't now say, well, I can solve that, given the things that you've done over the last year. Problems that everyone else would have said, well, there's nothing I can do about that. And you put sinks on the street, you're putting showers on the street. I mean, that's incredible. So I think the word I'm thinking of as I continue to learn about the things you've been doing recently is limitless. DC, what do you got?
Yo, so I heard you mention, Terence, thank you, Jeff, that a friend of yours named Lecrae said, I'll do 15 of the sinks. Is that the MC Lecrae?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So shout Lecrae.
Shout out to Lecrae, man. I appreciate you, homie.
Shout Lecrae. Yeah, that's we gotta get him in here. So two things. One is I mentioned Master P and I mentioned Tupac and this notion of making $1 out of 15 cents. I don't believe that there was ever a lyric that Pac spit, rest in peace, that he did not think about or did not have some purpose of. And the way that cat can ride a beat, ooh, Lord. But anyway, I think you're likely the same. So I don't think you do anything without a purpose. So I'm sitting here, for those of you all who cannot see Brother T here, I'm sitting here, he's got a cap on. I'm wondering like what's on the cap. And he's got a black hoodie on as I do as well. And I think I haven't seen just a little bit of the top. I think it might say God is dope or something like that. But tell me what's happening with the fit. And then I got a final thing.
Yeah. Man, I love to expression through clothes, clothes with messages. I get a lot of hoodies made that have like personalized sayings, like inequality is engineered. Like I have a hoodie I had made that said, being poor is not a crime. Different things like that to remind myself, have heart, right? This one does says God is dope.
Yeah, I thought it might say that, yeah.
And this one is Atlanta influences everything. And it just has the year established. And then it has a quote by Andre 3 Stacks that says the South got something to say. And I believe that is true, man. I remember when I was growing up in high school, there was this, you sound like you from up north. There was this like divide between North and South. I had family members in the North and they always had this perspective of Southerners that we were uneducated or like
country.
Country, and I remember that notion when Outkast had run award and Dre 3 Stacks said the South got something to say, right?
Source Awards in New York.
Yeah, in New York. In New York.
In New York,
but I take that personally, outside the context of hip hop, that I want my life to have something to say. The South has something to say. Where you're from, where you were brought up, all of the things that shaped you, all of your experiences, the collection of things that you embody as, for me, myself, as a Black man in this country, the South got something to say, and I'm coming, and I'm gonna wake up every single day of my life and give my all, man. Yeah,
my man, Jeff. Can I just say one other thing before we break this thing down here? All right. So, yo, T, the South got something to say. Houseless and homeless people got something to say, and Terence Lester got something to say. Let me describe you, bro, in this sort of the encapsulation of what's moved my spirit as to like who you are and what you do. I believe you are a reverse magnet of grace, a reverse magnet of grace. You find out where grace is needed, and your soul is attracted to that like a magnet. Not, I got a need and I think it could be met, and you come to me. No. Where the grace is needed, Terence Lester shows up. That's your gift, bro. That's your gift.
that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Respect.
Yeah, my man. Yeah, so glad that Jeff. Man, wow. I'm down to little like de minimis Russian dials. Now I can't even like take it up.
Oh, that was good. Reverse magnet of grace. Gosh, I love that. It's so true. Last question before I close this down, Terence, as you think about your favorite books of all time, books that made an impact on you, that you want to share with our guests. Do you have a couple that come to mind? Could be something you read 20 years ago, could be something you read last week.
Yeah. One of the books that has really given me a lot of depth and insight is this book called The Color of Law. Given a historical look at what redlining is, how ghettos were started, public housing, etc. And, even tying that to policy, it was federally mandated that you couldn't loan African Americans money to secure housing, right? And we understand now that wealth is generated through real estate. And you think about that in context of how many African Americans live in areas that are dense and have concentrated poverty. Well, that's the residue of the systemic things that were happening in the early 1900s, right? Another book too. Oh man, I have a lot of them, man. Democracy in Black by Eddie Glaude Jr. Man, there's a chapter in there that rocked me called The Value Gap. He's talking about how all of the systemic things in society and culture created a value gap that was like placed on the shoulders of Black and brown people, where their value was diminished, right? And those things weren't corrected in society and culture because the white aesthetic or white supremacists didn't see any value in a person of color. And so any books like that, gosh, man. Oh, Lies My Teacher Taught Me by James Lowen. Oh, Jesus. Oh, man. This brother is going through the historical context of the exclusion of Black and brown stories in historical studies in the context of K through 12 public education. Man, it wasn't until after high school that I had to do my own independent scholarship to get a deep dive in what Black history is and was and what it meant to me, because that education was excluded. And as the father of Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson says that if you can hide and strip away the stories of heroism and strength from a people, then you're actually impairing that people, right? In his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And so, yeah, man, like any type of those books that is speaking to my existence right now and helping me to understand like where we've come from and how we got to where we are now, it gives me a sense of confidence to continue to show up, man.
I love it. Those are great examples of books I'm going to be checking out, but I think people should. I will share real quickly. I grew up here in Atlanta. I went to Stone Mountain High School, and I remember so vividly being taught that the Civil War was absolutely not fought over slavery. It was fought over states' rights. And I thought I was smart for knowing that answer. I mean, I will admit that to you guys. I thought I was in the inn. That's how it was taught to us. Like, you're going to fall for this thing about it's about states' rights. So lies my teacher taught me. I'll be picking that up. Listen, first of all, DC, I appreciate you joining. Thanks for letting me sort of throw you into this and let you experience Terence. That's why I didn't share too much, because I knew that we'd get some really good stuff out of you. Terence, I feel so blessed and graced that we met each other and that I'm able to be a part of your journey in some way, shape, or form. You continue to inspire me. How can people help other than going to the website and donating?
Yeah, man, I've been really challenging people to create space and margin within the context of their own lives where they can make rhythm or service a rhythm, where service becomes a lifestyle instead of having it as only an event or something to check off. That service itself needs to become a core value of your existence.
Love it. All right. Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure.
All right, man. DC, nice to meet you. All right, Jeff. Thank you, man.
Good to see you.
All
Bye,
right,
guys.
Bye. All right, one.